Holy Spirit amongst us, that we may have discernment of your word, enjoy your word, learn from it, and apply it in our lives. I ask all these things in Jesus' name. So, started thinking, usually that's a bad thing to do. But both my brain cells were clicking. I sure hope it didn't. Yeah, I did. I know, I grabbed some. Yep. Keep this. I usually throw the papers away when I get home. We're starting in First Kings. We're going to talk about Solomon. Solomon. A man that, although people criticized, saying that it started out being the wisest of all men in the world, actually given that title, they pretty much, threw his, wisdom to folly, and,
Remember what he asked for though?
yeah,
Wisdom to rule his people.
yeah,
All wisdom.
you should ask for common sense. So here was Solomon. When Solomon was, they said Solomon was born between 11th and 10th BC. And it's approximately given that he reigned from 970 to 931 BC. They said, what do you most remember about Solomon? Was it his wisdom? Was it that he built the temple, or was it that he had all the wives he had? He had 700 wives, 300 concubines? That's way too many. Yeah. I don't know how many men you know that have a big ego, but I don't know anybody that has that big of an ego.
He did it for useless trees.
Yeah. I don't know, he didn't use that many trees.
No, it's direct disobedience to God's law.
Yeah.
They were not to increase wives nor bless the kings of Israel.
What's some of the things that he wrote, some of them like Proverbs. What's it like? Never argue with a fool. Bring it out to his level and beat you with experience. Henry has had his own version of it. It's like there's three people in life you don't, get into conflicts with: old people, children, and women. You can't win, no matter what. So Solomon was the king probably most remembered. He was probably the most remembered king of Israel next to David. Now, when I went to Israel, the Tomb of David was a sacred site. I mean, it had guards posted on it. I mean, they actually adored his tomb. And in fact, on the Sabbath, there were no pictures were allowed to be taken. And we had one person, there's always one in the crowd, they say, another proverb you can say, he decided to take a picture on the Sabbath. I tell you what, I've never heard so many rounds cycled into the guns in my life. I mean, they were all ready to shoot this guy on the spot. But the tour guide, convinced them otherwise. And in my opinion, that whoever it was that does such a thing, knowing foremost beforehand that, they take it that sacred, you deserve it. It's
arrogance.
Yeah.
Or stupidity. Both.
When you step up to anybody else's beliefs, as sacred as they are, and trample on them, be prepared to answer for the consequences of it. we find many of the guides in life to be given to us by Solomon or attributed to his life and his life adventures, like Song of Songs, okay, Ecclesiastes, and probably more familiar or associated to him would probably be Proverbs. Like I said, Proverbs, some of his Proverbs were, a kind word is heard easier than a harsh truth, something like that. And they say don't kill the messenger, but you don't want to be the messenger with bad news. So it's daily things like that he wrote down in Proverbs, that we use every day and probably don't even realize that's where we got them from. What's the other one? Song of Songs, it's praising. Hymns, praise. Probably a lot of our hymns that are written today come from the Song of Songs.
That's the song of marriage, joy of marriage.
Oh.
The Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, Canticles, it's called that way. But it's from the viewpoint of the Shulamite David, the bride of Solomon.
And what was the other one here? Ecclesiastes. Now, sorry, probably pinpointing a lot of things we take for granted. There's a time to mourn. There's a time for joy. Some people say, well, you win the lottery. Yeah. Aren't you excited about it? I was for the first 2 weeks, but not anymore. It's all I had. Yeah. So there's a time for everything. Farmers use the Ecclesiastes attitude most every time. They say it's a time to plant your crops, it's time to water the crops, it's time to reap the crops, right? And like I said, it's probably a lot of things he took for granted, but he wrote them down and made them sound really smart. So get into in 1 Kings 2, it says, when the time was drew near for David to die, he gave charge to Solomon his son. I'm about to go the way of the earth. Now, a poetic way of saying I'm about to leave this earth, leave this place, right? Now, I don't know if he actually said it that way. He probably said, son, I'm about to die. But that's not very poetic. So when I wrote it in verses, translating it, I mean, come on.
David was a poet. So
Yeah.
he wrote a lot of songs.
But David wasn't the one who wrote it down, would he?
Probably not.
So, and whenever you write a novel, you might write it in your handwriting, but it don't get published that way. Okay? You write a novel.
I gave an article once to a magazine. They published it. After I read it, I said, I don't give it.
They change it, they grammatically fix it so they're whatever they're putting it on paper, it reflects back on them. If you ever watched the movie Ghost, in it, Patrick Swayze tells Whoopi Goldberg, Demi Moore was his wife, he died. He's a ghost coming through, and he says, she's in trouble. You can't say it like that. So she says, you're in trouble, girl. She tried to sugarcoat the same words, but say it differently. So, like I said, when David was probably about to die, he's like, Solomon, I'm not going to be here much longer. I don't know how he said it. I wasn't there.
I guess not.
We could maybe ask John or Frank when they get here, and they might be, closer. Because was it Ronald Reagan says the candidate he was running against said he was the new Thomas Jefferson, and he told me, he goes, I knew Thomas Jefferson, and sir, you are no Thomas Jefferson. That's pretty, But he also made comments. These jokes, I love these jokes. He made jokes like about George Washington. He goes, just got to tell you, I didn't know George Washington. But, so he said, so be strong and act like a man. I don't know how Solomon acted before. But he's saying the weight of the world is going to be on your shoulders. You got to take the brunt of it. Stand strong, right? Now, this has got to be a tremendous thing. I didn't find how old Solomon was whenever David died to take over as a king. But to him to tell him that, he must have been in his early ages, maybe his early, 20s, maybe, because he's still coming out of his folly. I mean, and he said, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws, his regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go. And that the Lord may keep his promise to me if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me in all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. So, God told David that. David's trying to, pass on to Solomon. But, I mean, it's evident you can't control what your descendants do. I mean, John Walton's a prime example of that. He ran Walmart, he built it up, and there was a time whenever I remember people telling me that was the best place in the world to work. Yeah. They said when John Walton ran Walmart, he said he paid all your benefits, right? You worked well, you got paid well, right? Everything was a great place to work, right? Same thing with Disney. When Walt Disney ran Disney World, it was a great place to go and visit and have fun. It didn't cost you your whole life savings to go. Yeah, but they say, and they being the stories I've read about the Walton estate and stuff, that when his sons and daughters took over on it, that it destroyed it. It changed a lot of stuff. Like they don't pay all the benefits, they don't pay them well, they don't treat them well, whatever the case is. I don't work for them.
They made it, some say, the largest corporation in the world. So they're making money. They sure degraded their father's dream.
Yeah. And David here is trying to change that. He knows that God told him, and bring up a child in the ways of God, and they will not deter from them. Or that's the idea, anyways. A lot of people try to keep their kids in the straight and narrow path, and they get a taste of the honey on the other side of the fence, and they just think it's a whole lot better than where they were, until it's too late sometimes. And they fight to try to get back, and they think it's a pointless thing sometimes. But he says, now you yourself know that Joab, son of Zeruiah, you know what he did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the Israelis' armies. And Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether, he killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt round his waist and the sandals on his feet. It says, deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray beard go to the grave in peace. And I guess he's telling him, he says, don't let him die in battle.
No, he's telling them to execute.
Yeah.
Which he did.
Yeah.
Because David didn't have the courage to do it.
Well, when I read up on him, it said that David had him, he was one of the generals when Uriah was killed.
He was the general. He was a commander.
Yeah. So he was doing David's dirty work. But when David established a peace treaty, he went and killed them in the peace treaty. So he didn't, it's kind of like you create a monster and then get mad at what the monster does.
Well, it's not killed one of Joab's brothers to battle. But that called for loyalism, blood feud. But it was a battle. Loyalism doesn't,
No.
And so during the time of peace, he killed the man. Now, in his mind, he was doing the right thing. But it was murder.
Yeah.
It wasn't avenging. It was avenging.
Well, like I say, you create a monster, and you can't be mad at what the monster does. But so, anyways, and he goes to him and says, "But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and let them be among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom." So these are the people that helped him out, gave him food whenever he was hiding from Absalom. But they did me a good one. You do them a good one, all right? And it says, and remember, you had with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Baharim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Manaheim, or Hammon, whatever. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, I will put you to the death by the sword. But now, do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom, and you know what to do to him. Bring his grave head down to the grave in blood. So basically, he's saying, Solomon, as Jerry pointed out, he goes, I'm about to die, and I can't do this. I want you to take care of it for me. What do you see it in The Godfather? I want you to make him an offer that can't refuse. I want you to do this thing for me. You know, and that's the way I picture these things, right? David did what kings do, I guess, governors do, or whatever. And when he's about to die, he wants to make it right. So he's using Solomon to correct what errors he had in his, when he was king. It said, then David rested with his ancestors, was buried in the city of David. He had reigned for 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron, and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Now, it says, now Adonai, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and asked, Solomon's mother Bathsheba, and asked him, do you come peacefully? Right? I guess she was wondering if she was, are you on a rampage or?
Well, he was before you tried to steal the throne from Solomon.
Yeah. Well,
He was one of the older brothers.
Right. But he, in here, he had an fixation or an infatuation or a love with what was considered one of the concubines. It's related as a concubine of David.
She, and she wasn't really, she may be called them, but when he was old and dying,
Yeah, she took care of him.
yeah, more or less. And he probably never had intercourse with her.
Yeah, that's what
Well,
some
I'm
of the
pretty
Bible
sure
says.
it says that he didn't.
Yeah, but what Adonijah wanted to do, since she was considered a wife of his father, okay, if he married her, in his mind, and in ancient cultures, that gave him a legitimate claim to the throne. Now, he's older than Solomon. When Absalom rebelled against his father and Absalom died, he was next in line, so he thought primogeniture. The eldest son takes over, but David didn't feel that way. So, hey, I'll take one of his wives, and I'll marry her, and that gives me legitimacy.
Well, he says, as you know, he said, the kingdom is mine. Which relates, says, I'm next in line. It should be mine, not Solomon's. All Israel looked to me as their king, but things changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you, and do not refuse me. You may make it, she said. And so he continued. He says, please ask King Solomon, and he will not refuse you to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife. Very well, Bathsheba replied. I will speak to you, to the king for you. Now, she's the go-between. Many times you see in some of the medieval movies of kings and they go to the queen. A Night with a King in the movie was about Esther. Her uncle, Mordecai, he came to her and said, you must speak with the king, right? And she said, well, you can't just go to the king on your own. You have to be something. He goes, well, you got to find a way to speak to the king because, Haggai was attempting to kill all of your people. And don't think you'll be spared, right? Because, it'll come out that you're a Jew. And when he's killing all the rest of the Jews, you're going to be killed too. But, so in that aspect there, like I said, he didn't go to the king. He went to like a kind voice that the king might hear, right? So, uh, he says, very well. She says, I will speak to the king for you. But when Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. And he had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. I have one small request to make of you, she said, but do not refuse me. Now, right off, she's trying to get him to say, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Right? Instead of saying, look at people down at work, they'll go, hey, can you do me a favor? I said, well, that depends on the favor. Right? You know, do me a favor, give me all your money. If I were to say, yeah, I mean, I'm bound so much to say that, but ain't no way. Well, I can hand him my handshake and give him all my money. So the king replied, make it, my mother. I will not refuse you. So she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonai. Now, you'd think that Sheba, would have known the altercations involved with this, right? You would think she would have already known, by going and making this request, what it meant, right?
I think she was thinking more of the lines is to get this female out of here because she's more of a threat to anything
Yeah,
because
they're-
women are just jealous
The
by
other
nature.
999 weren't.
I'm just saying it would be one less, I
The
guess.
Song of Solomon, if you look at it, the wife is a Shunammite, and many scholars believe that Solomon married this woman, which in a sense is incest, but in ancient cultures, if you sleep with the king or the former king's wives, and then when Absalom rebelled against his father, he lined up the concubines on the roof where everybody could see he had sex with them. And it's his
Well,
way-
that's a form of, like in the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom, they do that. If you come in to establish yourself as the alpha male, and you take over the pride or the females, where you get your pick, then you are the alpha male.
And it's a way of saying, I have no respect for my father,
Right.
I'm not gonna go back.
He's
to
not
him.
in charge anymore, I am.
Who was this lady? I'm lost.
She was like a maid servant. She was a nurse.
So why was Solomon so, I don't understand why he's so against,
It's a form of rebellion, huh?
Yeah.
Again, the custom was, if I'm the king and I die, and my son or somebody takes one of my wives because they have numbers.
so she was one of David's wives?
Yeah, he has more
I
than
know.
concubines. They're
It's
just
One
women
that's-
hanging around. Like if he has an urge in the middle of the night, he can go pull a concubine
So,
out, have sex with her, and that was all it was.
oh,
No. They have no
For him.
choice. They have no choice in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a courtship. The king would come and say, hey, you look good. Put her in my harem. So really, the women had no choice in this.
Yeah, like I said, it's like the animal kingdoms in many aspects. Like the alpha male in the whatever animals they are, the alpha male picks whatever female they want to mate with. And this is similar to that in many aspects. He picked all these women, they're his, right? And if some other male tries to have sex with him, they're trying to usurp his kingdom, his throne. They're taking away what's his. It's like stealing from him. But this what's her name? Abishai. She, when I was reading up on her, she was like taking care of David when he was sick and all getting old. And there's no indications in what I read that she had sex with him, right? But she's considered one of his concubines. And a lot of the writings that I read up on.
so it'd be against the law for her.
Well, the thing of it is, the fellow once heard, when David was dying, he had a party, called in the high priest, called in Joab, a few others, and he set himself up as king because he's next in line in his mind. Okay? Well, Solomon got the throne instead. So in Solomon's mind, anything he does is suspicious. And to take his father's concubine, that sets him up for another rebellion. And Solomon said, no, I'm going to nip it in the bud. bloody bunch, yeah, this is his half brother. This bloody bunch.
And he went to Solomon's mom to try and get her to help him persuade him to have this union. Right, the kids do it all the time, I guess, even then, they go ask mom, go ask dad.
Well, Catholics do it. Do the Virgin Mary, because she's the mother of God. And you won't deny her.
This Catholic guy I met once, I said, why do you pray to the Virgin Mary? He goes, one kid, Jesus is busy. I said, really? So you'd think you'd have an answer machine.
Jesus is too busy to take care of them.
It says, then King Solomon swore by the Lord, which is not what you're supposed to do. Christ told us that. You know,
Oh, remember though, this is before Christ.
right.
And the Savior.
But he swore to the Lord, he said, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonai does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David, and has founded a dynasty for me as he promised, Adonai shall be put to death today. So King Solomon gave orders to Benani, son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonai, and he died. Now it says here, I wrote in here, that Abishai was a beautiful young Shumite virgin who became a caregiver for the elderly King David to keep him warm. And although the Bible states there was no sexual relationship, she was considered part of his harem. And after David's death, his son Adonai request to marry her was interpreted by King Solomon as a bid for the throne, leading to Adonai's execution. So, like I said, he was trying to establish himself as the alpha male in the kingdom, and Solomon's like, no, it's my throne. I won't share it with anyone. You can't have two kings, you can't have two queens, which, like I said, the early Solomon was considered wise, right? And he had all them wives, he was an idiot. You may hear people brag about how many women they've been with, but that's moronic. To me, it is. You can't have two women in the same household, and expect it to thrive, because one of them's going to say, "That's my kitchen."
Or about the 700.
Yeah, they all said, "That's my house." They would have had to have 700 or 1,000 different houses.
They did. Bible says he built the
Well,
temple.
nobody was
Each one
allowed to be with the king's wives. And there must have been an awful lot of unhappy men when he had 700.
He had 1,000. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines.
Very possibly, the only time he ever had sex with them was their marriage night to consummate marriage. But the 700 were all princesses, foreign kings. And so, the logic is, you're not going to invade my country because your daughter's here. And she'll be the first to die. Or your grandchildren, she has children. I mean, these had to be unhappy women.
Yeah.
I mean, they're, you buy them more or less, okay? The dad comes here and says, honey, I'm going to sign a treaty with Solomon. I'm going to give you to him. That's my treaty. I mean,
She might have thought, she may not, I don't know how many other women she knew was there, but her first thought was, well, he's a wealthy guy.
Yeah.
He's got a big kingdom. I'll be set for life.
Yeah, they were set for life, yeah. But he built temples and palaces for them, which caused problems because he had to tax his people. And the Bible says he used some of his people as forced laborers. They weren't slaves, but they didn't have a choice in it.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, you get upset with a politician that does something like that. And they were ripe for rebellion.
Okay, it says, verse 26 says, to Abiathar, the priest, the king said, go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David, and shared all of my father's hardships. So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word of the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. In 1 Samuel 2, verse 30, says, therefore the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever. But now the Lord declares, Far be it from me, those who honor me, I will honor. But those who despise me, I will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and your strength of your priestly house, so that no one in it will reach old age. And you will see distress in my dwelling. Although good will be done to Israel, no one in your family line will reach old age. Every one of you that I did not cut off from serving at my altar, I will spare only to destroy your sight, sap your strength, and all of your descendants will die in the prime of life. Now, when I first read this before, covered in Samuel, right, his two sons died in the battle, right? And they were doing horrible things in the house of the Lord, stealing from the Lord. They said they used to put the meat in in like a pot, boiling it, and then after a certain time it would be done. They would put the fork in and they would take out a portion because not all of it comes out, and that would be what they get. What they were doing is they would stick it in with the fork in it and basically just taking the whole thing out. So they were stealing from the Lord, and God knew this, right? So Solomon's fulfilling the prophecy that God told Eli back then, right? Because Eli, he fell over in his chair when the news came back, his sons were dead, fell over in a chair and died. Okay, but here's the prophecy being fulfilled that God said, and Solomon just says, this is a descendant of Eli, and that he goes, no more of you are going to be priests. And this guy says, nope. He goes, because you carried the ark in that time frame, we'll give you, a good measure of kindness, but you're not a priest anymore. And to me, if that's your livelihood, if you were considered a priest and you strive to be a priest, and they come tell you you're not going to be a priest, your family's not going to be a priest, nobody in your family is ever going to be a priest again, that's got to be a shot in the head. That's got to be quite significant. In some cases, there are people in the United States, if you've ever met people in the military, and they say, well, why did you join the Army? And they say, well, my great-grandfather served in the Army.
Thank you.
My grandfather served in the Army. My father served in the Army. It's like a family thing, right? We're like the seventh generation of people that fought in the Army. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was at the Civil War, stuff like that. So in this case, this is quite a dishonor to this guy, even though, Solomon's telling basically, they're saying, hey, we're not going to kill you, but you're not going to be a priest anymore. So, God's prophecy is being fulfilled in this, but like I said, that's got to be quite a slap in the face whenever you get hit with that, But on a positive note, not going to kill you. But you might as well kill me in some aspect. They look at it. You might as well kill me because what do I have to look for? I got to try to find something else. And everybody that looks at you is going to be like, hey, aren't you a priest? Nope, carpenter now. Aren't you a priest? Nope, tent maker. What happened? And then you got to relive that story over and over again, right? Well, they are pretty much already know because, come on, you study it in the temples. But they said when the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonai, though not with Absalom, and he fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. And King Solomon had told Joab, that he was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiakim, to go strike him down. So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, the king says, come out. But he answered, I will die here. And he's like, you can't come in and get me, So I'm staying right here where I can think I'm safe. He's safe. But he answered, because Benaiah reported to the king, this is how Joab answered me. And the king commanded Benaiah, do as he says. Strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord would pay him for the blood he shed because without my father David knowing it, he attacked two men and killed them with a sword. Both of them, he broke the peace treaty. Like I said, as Darius went on, he went out, what do you call it? The retribution for a family member dying?
Like feuding. Goalism.
Goalism. he did it outside of, he died in battle, right? But he didn't see it that way. And when I was reading it, the first thing I thought of was you create a monster, you deal with the monster, So, so Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, went out and struck down Joab and killed him, and was buried at his home out of the country. Then King put Benaniah, son of Jeroboam, over the army, and he put him in Joab's position, and replaced Abner the Zodak, the priest. Abner was Zodak the priest. So he replaced the priest and replaced Joab. We see that happening today a lot of times. When the king's not happy with the way you're running the army, you're not the general anymore. This guy is. If you don't like it, tough. You're not the commander in chief. I am. There was a lot of criticism with the way that President Trump changed the way his cabinet, the things he did. But whenever certain things happened with them doing what Trump had, put them in charge of, they were like, "Oh, that's pretty good," And they changed their minds in many aspects, but they still have, some criticism, about the way they're doing it. But
You remember, we don't remember because we were there, when MacArthur wanted to use the atomic bombs and to the Korean conflict. It was, President Truman said no. MacArthur said we need to remove him. He was one of the most popular generals of the era.
Yeah.
The president's in charge.
well, I think whenever you're in the fighting on the front line, I don't think you have a big picture of the big picture. I used to tell the guys down at work, I said, supervisors that get in the middle of something, they're helping you. I said, you can't see the picture if you're part of it. You should be stepping back so you can see the big picture. And if you can't see the big picture, you can't get an idea on how to guide around in the big picture. That's why, many times the king or the pharaoh or the emperor, whatever you want to call them, they're in the very back, or up on high ground. So they can see how the battle's, taking place, and then they direct the troops accordingly. They'll tell the generals to do this, and then, I'm gonna have to stop this short because nature's calling. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for being with us today and studying Solomon. If it be your will, continue it next Sunday. I ask you to be with Jerry as he brings a message. I ask you to be with us as we travel on our ways and to the rest of the day. We ask him at least things in Jesus' name.